Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today's tutorial will be on how to make the upper part of this gown that has a shared cutout. The video is lengthy, that's why I made it into two parts. So we're going to be having this and another part two for the sewing aspect of it. Do subscribe to the channel, share to friends, don't forget to give us a thumbs up. Alright, thank you so much. See you in the part two. This is my pattern paper. I'll be working with this. I've already gone ahead to mark out my shoulder line. Okay, so from here to here is my half length, which is 16 inches. I added extra half an inch for seam allowance. Okay, now the next thing is my chest line, which is from the shoulder to the chest line is 8.5 inches. Then my bust point, which is at 10 inches from the shoulder line. The next point is the under bust, which is 13 inches. Then the waist, which is at 16 and a half, serving also as my half length. Okay, so now the next thing I'm going to go ahead to do now is I'm going to go ahead and insert my body measurements, round body measurements. So on my chest line, I'm going to go ahead and insert my bust measurements, which is quarter of my bust measurement, which is 8.5 inches. The next thing I'm going to go ahead now and insert is on my under bust line. I'm going to go ahead and insert quarter of my under bust measurement, and I have 7.25 inches. Okay, then the next thing is my waist measurement, which is 7 inches here. So this is what I have. Then I'm going to connect the points together. So from my chest line, I connect to my under bust. From there, I'm going to connect to my waist. So this is what I have. Okay, now the next thing at points I'm going to be marking is my nipple to nipple measurement. So I have 4 inches from the center of my fabric, the center of my pattern paper. I'm going to be marking it from my bust points on my under bust and on my waistline. Then I'm going to connect the points. This is what I have. The next thing I'm going to go ahead to do now is on the waistline, I'm going to be marking 1.5 inches. If you're on the large side, you can go ahead and mark 2 inches. I also go ahead and mark the same stuff on my under bust. Then connect it with a rule. This is my dart intake. This is what I have. The next thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to be connecting it using a curve from this bust point to my under bust. Okay, so that's the point or the curve I'm going to be making now. So at this point now, I'm connecting from my under bust to my bust point. So this is what I have. Okay, so now the next thing we are going to do is we are going to be working on our shoulder line. So the shoulder measurements I'm working with is 7.5 inches, but because this is a sleeveless and it's a mono strap, I'm going to be removing 1 inch from my 7.5 inches. So I'm going to be left with 6.5 inches. This is my 6.5. I also go ahead and mark it on my chest line. Then I'm going to connect it with a stretch rule. Okay, so this is what we have. So having marked my line, joining them together, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come down by 1 inch for my shoulder slope. So this is my 1 inch shoulder slope. Then the neck width I'm going to be working with is 4 inches. Okay, or I can decide to work with, I'm going to be working with 3.5 inches because I don't want the strap to be too tiny. But if you want yours to be tiny, then go ahead and work with 4 inches neck width. So this is what I have. Now I'm going to connect these two shoulders together. That's my shoulder, neck width, and my shoulder slope together. So this is what I have. The next thing I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to be dividing what I have left by 2 to get the midpoint. So this is where the midpoint of my armhole falls. Now I'm going to go ahead and come in by half an inch from that midpoint. So this is my half an inch. Then I'm going to be creating an armhole curve. From my slope, I'm going to connect to the half an inch this way. Then from the half an inch, I'm going to be curving it into my chest line. So this is what I have when I'm done. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to be measuring what I have here around my armhole. So I have about 9 inches. So I'm going to go ahead and find the midpoint where my 4.5 falls. So this is what I have. This is where it falls. Okay, that is half of my round armhole measurements. This is where it falls. Now from that point, I'm going to be connecting it to my bust point. So I've gone ahead and connected it to my bust point. Now the next thing to do is I'm going to be imputing an armhole dart or putting an armhole dart to avoid bulging, okay, or being too like puffy. So I'm going to go ahead and mark half inch on both sides as my dart intake. So this is what I have, half inch on both. Now the next thing to do is to connect it to my bust point. So this is what I have. I've gone ahead to connect this my half inch to my bust point. Now the next thing again I'm going to do is, since we have removed 1 inch from here, we're going to be adding it back to our armhole. Okay, so I'm going to be adding extra half an inch to it. Reason why I'm adding extra half an inch is because of joining, okay, so that at the end of the day everything will be enough. Instead of it being short, instead of us having shortage, we'll have excess, then we'll trim off. Okay, so I'm going to place my tape in a slant manner and add my 1.5 inches. So now I'm going to go ahead and retrace my armhole measurements. So this is my new armhole now. Okay, so now having done this, the next thing we're going to go ahead to do now is to insert the measurements we have removed from this pattern. So I'm going to be starting off with my waist and bust, under bust measurements. Remove 1.5 inches. We're going to be adding extra 1 inch, making it 2.5 inches. The same thing to our under bust. Then at this point, let me say half an inch. We're going to be adding it back here. Seam allowance, making it 1 inch. So this is what we have. Now this is not our actual seam allowance. I will go ahead and insert my actual seam allowance, or the seam allowance I want to work with. Now I'm going to connect them together.
So this is what I have for my bust. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to go ahead to do now is I'm going to be marking my neck area, my neck depth. So I'm going to be working with 5 inches neck depth. So from my shoulder line, I'm going to mark my 5 inches. This is where I have my 5 inches. I'm going to be forming my curve. So this is what I have. Now we'll go ahead and cut this pattern paper out. So guys, the next thing we're going to be doing now is to cut out our piece. So this is how it's going to be. I'm cutting from this point. So this is the pieces I have. Now I'm going to be pinning it together. This is the center and this is the two sides. So I'll go ahead and pin it together using its paper sellotape or any sellotape of your choice. At this point now, I've gone ahead to use a tape to hold my pieces or my pattern papers together. Alright, so now the next thing I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be from this armhole, I'm going to be making a curve into my neckline. So I'm just going to be using a free hand. So from here I'm connecting into my chest line. Okay, it's still not okay. Now just want to connect it to this neck area here. So this is what I have. I'm going to go ahead and cut this out. So this is what we have. Okay, so now the next thing I'm going to do is from the center of my piece, I'm going to be coming down by 2 inches. So this is my 2 inches. All right, here. And the next thing is, because I want to create that hole or that sheer cutout that is there, then from the shoulder line I'm going to come in down. I'm going to divide this into two and I have 1.5. So this is my center point. I'm going to be coming down about 1 inch because it did not get to the shoulder line. So from here now I'm going to connect to this point that is here. I just want to do something for us before then. From this point now I'm also going to create another curve. I don't know what I'm doing but it's really kind of somehow. Okay, all right, I'm trying to create a hole. So this is what I'm doing. Now mind you, you're not going to make your hole to be too big because when you are done stitching and everything, it may come out very large, okay, SX, and the opening will be too much. You may not like it. So I would suggest you create something sizable. At the end of the day, it will really, after stitching and all the rest of them, it will still blend in very well. So this is what I've created here. I don't know how it looks. So this is what I have. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this out. So I'm going to be folding it in. Or if you have, there is this stuff you can use and cut it, so it's not going to be too. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this out. To cut it out, I decided to open it up from here. I'm going to still close it back. All right. So this is what I have. Then I'm going to go ahead and close this back, please. So this is what we have. So I'm going to go ahead and label it 1, 2, 3. 1F, 2F, 3F. Reason is because when I'm cutting on my lining or my fabric, I'll not be confused. Okay, so this is what we have. Now next we're going to be working on our back piece. For my back piece, from here to here is my half length. So I'm going to labeling this as X, my shoulder. This is my chest line. The next thing is I'm going to mark is 13 inches my under bust, 10 inches my nipple points, okay, or my bust points. Then this is my waistline. I'm going to go ahead and make a rule. Wow, the marker is almost finished. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to be imputing my shoulder measurements. Remember the shoulder measurements we worked with, the other one is 6.5 because we removed 1 inch from it. The neck width we worked with is 3.5 inches, which is here. Okay, now the neck depth I'm going to be working with is 2 inches. So for this space I have here is 1.5 inches, which is for my zip. Okay, now from this 3.5 I'm going to be connecting it to these 2 inches I have here, which is my, sorry, I'm using a free hand. It may not come out the way you want or the way you like. So this is my neck depth. All right, so from this point now I'm going to be coming down by 1 inches, which is my shoulder slope, 1 inch. Then I have my armhole, so I'm going to connect this to this, my neck width to my shoulder slope, which I have. So coming to my chest line, I'm going to mark 6 inches, 6.5 inches. This is what I have here, and I'm going to divide it by 2 to get my midpoint. Then I'm going to come up by half an inch, connect it to create my shoulder, to create my armhole curve, just like what I'm doing. This is what I have. All right, so now I'm going to be marking my bust span measurements on nipple to nipple, which is 4 inches. So for my bust points, I'm going to be coming up by 1 inches. So this is my 1 inch. This B, this is U, this is waist, this under bust, this bust point. So on both sides of this line, I'm going to mark half an inch, the left and the right. This is for my dart intake. And I'm going to connect it to the 1 inch I have up from my bust point. This is my dart. Alright, so this is what I have. The next thing to do now is I'm going to divide my bust measurements by 4 to get quarter of it. I will insert it here. The same thing at my under bust, I have 7.25, sorry. Then on my waist, I have 7 inches. Now at the waist area, I've removed 1 inch. I'm going to be adding it back to my pattern paper plus 2 inches seam allowance, making it 3. Here at the under bust, I have an inch, so I'm going to be adding 2.5 inches seam allowance. Then my chest line, I'll go ahead and add my seam allowance. So I'm going to connect the points together. So this is what I have. I'm going to go ahead and cut this pattern paper out. I'm not touching the darts. I'm not opening up the darts for now. Just let it be for now. So this is what I have. Now I'm going to be closing up this zip because I want to place this on my front piece to cut out the mono strap at the back. Alright, so this is what we have. So this zipper allowance is closed. So I'm going to place it this way. Then I'm going. So guys, the next thing I did was just to place my front piece on top of the back piece. Alright, so this is serving as the wrong side of my pattern paper and this is serving as the right side. Okay, so now I'm going to remove this I have here. Right, the reason is, remember that here I have an inch extra while cutting it out then, so I'm going to lap it over to 1.5 to half an inch, which is here. So I'm going to go ahead and pin or use my tape to secure it down. All right, now the next thing I'm going to do is just to go ahead and cut this off. So having done this, this is what we have. So you'll now go ahead and separate it. So remember, I still have my zip allowance there. I'm going to slit this part open. Then the next thing I'm going to go ahead to do is to label it. So write B1. Yeah, this is how it is, right? This is what we have. And this one is right B. Okay, this one is 1 and this one is 2. Okay, and this is for our front pieces. When you turn it back, this is what you have. The next thing to do is to transfer this to your fabric.